Hello and welcome back. This is the week 6 lecture. So today we start on summarizing. This is our next big skill to master. And if you think about how we've spent the first 5 weeks of the semester, we've really been focused on reading. Improving our reading ability, becoming more critical, careful readers. And then, of course, last week we started on research. But now that we're starting to find sources, now that the research has begun, we need to get comfortable summarizing long, complex articles and book chapters. So that's what we begin on this week. We're going to learn a series of skills beginning this week that will help us to better utilize our sources. Because we need to use them later, obviously, on our research papers. So we're going to learn how to summarize these sources. We're going to learn how to paraphrase them. And we're going to learn how to directly quote them. And those are all skills, obviously, that we'll be using on the research paper. So let's talk a little bit about what a summary is. Now, we've already been doing some summarizing in this class. That's the good news. And students are usually pretty familiar with what a summary is, what it's good for, and how to do one. You guys have been summarizing throughout your academic careers, but we just need to kind of review a little bit of what we already know, and then let's add to it. So going all the way back to the Area 51 article, we've been summarizing some of the things that we've read. And obviously on the bibliography, I asked you guys to provide summaries for all of your sources. So we've already been doing some very brief summaries. But what I want to look at this week is how to do more complex, elaborate summaries to go along with long, complex sources. So we need to sort of extend our summaries a little bit this week and get more in depth. So let's just start with a working definition of what a summary is. And we probably already know this, but I want us to all be using the same definition. So for us, a summary is simply a condensed restatement of a text's main ideas and most important parts. So a couple of key words here to think about. A condensed restatement. To condense something means to make it shorter, to make it smaller, to make it more brief and efficient. So that's what we're doing here. We're obviously shortening these original sources down into much shorter versions. The other key word is restatement. Okay, summaries are going to be in our own words, but we are restating the ideas and the arguments of our authors, the authors of our sources. So it's important to remember that although summaries are going to be in our own words, you are not offering your own opinions. You are not offering your own views, your own evaluations, your own attitudes or feelings or beliefs. We're not doing that yet. Don't worry, we will be evaluating, we will be sharing our opinions later on future assignments, and obviously we will eventually be doing those things with the research paper. But here with our summarizing, there's really no room to editorialize. There's no room to offer opinions of your own, not yet. For now, we are just sticking with capturing the main ideas of our sources. That's all we're doing this week. Okay? So we're really trying to capture the overall essence of the source that we are summarizing, the overall impression that it delivers or conveys. So we're just focused on what the author is saying. We're not yet sharing what we think about it. We are just trying to faithfully and accurately restate or recreate what the author was doing or saying in their source. But we're doing it with our own words, our own sentences, and our own paragraphs. So obviously, before you can start to summarize anything, you must read it, You must read it in its entirety from start to finish. And, of course, don't forget all of the critical reading strategies that we've been practicing throughout the semester. Make sure to annotate as you read, jot down notes. Make sure to underline or highlight the really important passages or statements. That's going to be very important when it's time to sit down and write a summary. If you're underlining or highlighting really important claims, really big ideas, you can use those later. You can talk about those. You can restate those in your own words, in your own sentences. So don't forget about annotating, underlining, and asking questions. As long as you're doing all of that stuff, you'll have some things to work with when you sit down to summarize. So today we're going to start practicing by looking at individual paragraphs. And then we'll graduate and move on to looking at complete essays. And eventually, our goal for the end of the week is to be able to summarize one of our own sources. So by the end of this week, you need to pick a source that you have found so far. Maybe it appeared on your bibliography last week, or maybe you just found it this week. But we're going to be summarizing a source of our own for the big formal summary that's due at the end of the week. So to start our practice, take a look at the PDF that I posted in the Week 5 module called Summarizing Sources. This is our reading for the week, but mostly I just want you guys to use it as a way to practice. So beginning on page 76 of this PDF called Summarizing Sources, on page 76 over to page 78, they show you some examples of different types of paragraphs. So in some cases, we want to just summarize individual paragraphs. We might just want to tackle individual paragraphs inside a longer source because this paragraph looks helpful. It looks like it might be useful. Maybe it's jam-packed with a lot of good evidence, and we think we're going to use some of that stuff later on. And also, with really long sources, sometimes we can't summarize the whole thing at once. So even when you're writing your longer summary about the entire source, you might want to start by just tackling some individual paragraphs or individual sections of the longer source to just get comfortable with the ideas. And then you can start to put all of those smaller summaries together, and you might be able to cover the whole thing. But for now, we're just going to use paragraphs as a way to get started, as a way to practice, and then we'll move on to longer texts. But as they tell you on page 76, some paragraphs will kind of summarize themselves, and this makes our lives easier. So the first example they're showing you on page 76 is a paragraph with a really strong topic sentence. And we're probably familiar with topic sentences. We've written some of our own, probably. We're going to be talking more about them as we start to write more as the semester goes on. But you guys probably know that in an essay or any kind of text, a topic sentence typically announces what that paragraph is going to be about. So a topic sentence will usually appear early in a paragraph. It might be the first sentence of a paragraph, or at least will occur very early on in the paragraph, and it tells us what that paragraph is about, what's being discussed in that paragraph. So they show you this example, and you have a topic sentence that you can find and identify and then later use. So if you're able to spot a good topic sentence or a good summary sentence, and they don't always come at the beginning of a paragraph. Sometimes they might come near the end. But if you can find one of those that just feels like it's an overview of the entire paragraph, it feels like it's summarizing pretty much everything that's been said in the paragraph. If you can find a summary sentence like that, you can write it down or, highlight it, underline it, and then put it into your own words. Because remember, we're not quoting yet. We are going to be in a couple of weeks, but we're not yet. So now all of our summaries need to be in our own words. But yeah, maybe you can find a really good topic sentence or another sentence in the paragraph that serves as a summary sentence. It pretty much summarizes the whole paragraph. If you can find that, identify that, put it in your own words, and now that paragraph is pretty much summarized. The work has largely been done for you. But then in the next example, at the top of page 77, they show you a paragraph that doesn't really have a true topic or summary sentence, but it's got a bunch of key phrases. It's got a bunch of big ideas that we can identify throughout our reading. So we can underline, or in the case of the example, circle some of these key ideas or phrases. And then we can sort of put them all together in a new sentence of our own, as they're showing you on page 77. So again, you're not quoting those things that you highlighted or underlined, but once you've sort of called attention to them, you can sit down while looking at them and write a new sentence or two of your own that basically restates what you highlighted or what you underlined. So just like they're doing at the top of 77. But then with their final example at the bottom of 77 over to 78, they give us a paragraph that really is not so easy to summarize. There's no easy summary sentence that we can identify. There's not even a lot of obvious key phrases that we can highlight and later use. So we kind of have to start from scratch. They're telling us, with that third paragraph, all we really can see is that there's lots of examples. The author's kind of using a series of examples. So if we wanted to summarize that paragraph, we would really just need to sit down and kind of talk about those examples, briefly mention those examples in a couple of new sentences of our own. So again, use our annotations. We can still highlight. We're still taking notes as we read, so we can still use that stuff when we summarize. But sometimes we just have to write brand new sentences of our own where we're just basically restating what we've read, the most important parts of what we read. So in some cases, we can use a summary sentence and just restate it. Sometimes we can find those key phrases, string them together, and once again, restate them. Other times, we just have to write a new entity, a new thing, a new creation, a new sentence or two based on what we just read and based on whatever notes we did manage to take. But remember, when we're condensing, when we're making smaller, when we're shortening, we have to leave stuff out. That's the nature of summarizing. We can't include everything. So a big part of summarizing is selection, making choices. Summarizing is not a passive thing. You have to make active choices. What are the most important things here? What are the things that I can leave out? So again, like we said back in week 1 or week 2, don't underline everything. Underline the most important ideas, and then they might find their way into your summary. Some things that might seem cool, they might seem interesting, they might even seem kind of important in their own right, you're still going to have to leave them out because you can't mention everything. So we don't want our summaries to be too long. We have to condense. We have to only talk about the most important stuff. Once we get comfortable with these paragraphs, you might want to grab a paragraph or two from one of your own sources and just kind of see if that paragraph looks anything like some of these examples on pages 76 to 78. Can you find a paragraph that kind of has a summary sentence, whether it be a topic sentence at the beginning of the paragraph or maybe a sentence that comes later that pretty much provides an overview of that entire paragraph? If so, great. Go ahead and grab it. Do you see other paragraphs that might just have some of those key phrases that you can underline and then rework? like we see at the top of 77, just maybe grab a paragraph or two and practice summarizing it. Just looking for some of the stuff that we just talked about, and then if you don't find it, just read the paragraph, jot down your notes, and then write a brand new summary. Just create a new sentence or two based on what you just looked at. So once you get comfortable summarizing on a small scale, we can move on and start tackling entire essays. So our basic procedure is going to stay the same here no matter what we are summarizing. So maybe it's a short article, like a newspaper article that's only a couple of pages long, but we can also do this for a much longer academic journal article that's going to be more complex, it's going to be denser, and it's going to take us more time, but we can follow the same basic summarizing procedure for any kind of source, no matter what it is, as long as it's, a good source. We can first use our critical reading strategies. I won't go back through all of those in depth, but just remember to annotate, underline, and ask questions. And of course, read. You can't skim, you can't jump around, you have to read the entire source from start to finish, and while you're doing that, practice our critical reading strategies. Once you're finished reading and taking your notes, you can move on to the next step of the procedure, which is to start getting organized. So I've posted another PDF, a separate thing, just an example that you guys can look at of kind of what it looks like when we take some of our annotations, some of our questions, and some of the things that we underlined or highlighted, and we put them in a list of sequential notes. A sort of sequential or any kind of numerical list. So this is just an easy way to get organized. Once I've finished reading my essay, I might have 5 or 6 annotations that I've written down, a couple of questions, and then a few other things that I just highlighted or underlined. I need to start working with those. I need to put those in a more useful format. So I can put them in a numbered list. And by assigning numbers to each thing that I might want to talk about, each important idea that I might need to restate, I can start getting organized. So if you look at my example, it's just called numbered list example. You can see kind of how this looks, what this looks like. Just a list of notes. Some of them are questions that I wrote down. Some of them could just look like annotations, observations, explanations. Should scientists try to influence the way discoveries are used? That's number 1. Number 2, author's point of view. Blank, fill in the blank. So that's another thing. Number 4, in the past, some scientists did this. Just an observation. Now, maybe they do something else. So you can take a look at some of these individual notes. Some are a couple of sentences. Some are just really short, brief sentences. Some are questions. Some are statements. Some might just be exact phrases or sentences that I underlined. Those can also make their way into my notes, but I'm numbering them. Or you can assign letters to them, or, Roman numerals, whatever you want. But here in my example, I have a list of 12. So these are 12 things, 12 statements or ideas or even questions that I might need to mention or incorporate into my summary. But I already know I'm not going to have space for all 12 of these. I'm condensing. So I don't have room for all 12 of these notes. So now I'm making my selections. What are the most important things here? And this is easy because I can just use them, I can just refer to them as numbers. So number 1, yeah, that's a good one. Number 2, maybe I can live without it. But numbers 3 and 4, really good. So maybe I decide that the first paragraph of my summary will really focus on numbers 1, 3, and 4. And then I decide, okay, I'm not going to use 5 or 6. I like 7. 10 seems really good, and then I want 11 and 12. So now my second paragraph might be 7, 10, 11, and 12, or whatever other points I think are most important. But again, this is a process of selection and choosing. You can't just throw everything into the summary and hope it works out. You have to use only the most important points, ideas, and they should be in your notes. If you've done a good job of reading and annotating and underlining, your notes should have all the important stuff. But now you got to get even more selective and get only the very most important stuff. And that's the stuff that's going to make it into your summary. But by using the numbered list, you can also start to kind of outline your summary. Like I said, the first, handful of points, number 1, 3, and 4, that's paragraph 1. And then maybe paragraph 2, I'm going to use 7, 10, 11, and 12. So now I can start structuring my summary, and I know what order I'm going to talk about these things in. So using a numbered list like my example shows, that's really the second step of this overall procedure, just getting organized, figuring out exactly what you want to focus on in your summary and what order all of that stuff is going to appear in. Then the next part of the procedure is figuring out, okay, what's the overall argument here? Hopefully that's in your notes. Hopefully that's already in your numbered list of notes. But if it's not, don't go any further without figuring out the thesis. We always have to do this. With any source that we are working with, we have to know what's the overall argument. What is the overall point, the overall purpose of this source? We always have to know that. And like I said, sometimes we might not feel like our sources are really making arguments. We might feel like they're just stating facts, they're just providing information, but there's always a purpose. There's always a point. Even if we don't necessarily think of it as an argumentative thesis, there's always a purpose we can identify, and you need to write that down if it's not already in your notes. And then you can start, like I said, you can kind of start planning paragraphs or thinking a little bit more about how your summary is going to look. So once you're ready to start writing, let's stick with a multi-step procedure here. So we have a 3-step process for the actual writing of the summaries. Okay. First, we need to introduce our source. This is always important, both when you're presenting these summaries to an audience to help the audience accomplish something, and also when you're going to use these summaries later for yourself, because these summaries, as we know, are going to help us later when we are working with these sources. So a summary, above all else, it's a way of recording our understanding of our sources. Okay, so we can always use these. These have practical value for us because we're going to have a lot of sources. You're going to forget stuff that you read. So by summarizing these sources, we have a record, an eternal record, a long-lasting record that we can use whenever we want. We can come back and refresh our memories, find the most important ideas, and that's going to be really important once we start using these sources later in bigger assignments. So you always need to start by identifying the source. That's going to be helpful for your audience, but it will also be helpful for you. So identify the source by telling us the title and the names, or the names, if there's multiple authors, give us the authors, either one or multiple. You can also include the name of the publication where the source first appeared, and even the publication date if you want to. Those are more optional. The mandatory aspects of the intro will be title and author name. But I also just want you to kind of provide a framework for us to understand a little bit more about this source. That's also part of the introduction. Give us an idea of the overall structure and scope of this source. what kind of source is this? Is this an academic journal article? Or is it a newspaper article? Is it a book chapter? Or is it a website? You need to make it clear so I know what we're dealing with. What kind of source is this? How long is it? How complex is it? What kind of audience was it targeted for? An academic audience or a more general popular audience? That's all the basics that we can establish in the intro. Then you get to part 2, which is the arrangement of major ideas, the big ideas. Now you're presenting all of the most important stuff in a clear, straightforward fashion. So again, this is the part that maybe you were already planning with your notes. This is going to be the body of your summary. It might be 1 paragraph, it might be 2, it might be 3 for some of the longer sources that you're going to be summarizing. So this is where you do the bulk of your work. This is where you walk us through the main ideas, the most important points, the most important types of evidence. Like, you can mention evidence like we've been doing if there's some really important statistics or a really important anecdote or something that was just very powerful or memorable. It helped the author to prove one of their big claims or to sort of illustrate one of their big ideas. But basically, pretty much everything in your list of notes, everything that you've written down or highlighted up until this point, it's going to be restated in the sentences and paragraphs that you write for the second part of the summary, part 2, the arrangement of big ideas. And then finally, part 3 is the restatement of the thesis. This is the last thing that you need to do before signing off. Make sure you are restating, delivering in your own words the overall argument or the overall point or purpose of the source. So we have our intro where we literally introduce the source and just kind of provide a basic framework for understanding it. This is what it is. This is the kind of source it is. You can even mention the topic that the source is tackling: wildfires, education in America, whatever. Just give us the scope, give us an intro so we know what we're getting into. Then the arrangement of ideas, the body of the summary, where you're restating most of the stuff you've already written down in your notes. And then finally, drive home the thesis in part 3 in your own words. So if we can stick to this procedure, we can start practicing it this week. We'll get comfortable with it by the end of the week, and then we can use it for the rest of the semester, no matter what type of source we happen to be summarizing. So what I want you guys to do as soon as you turn off this video, a little practice run. If you look at the week 6 module, I've posted something called Higgins Essay. And this is a short essay written by Jessica Higgins called, what's the name of it? Is a picture worth 1,000 words? Question mark. Is a picture worth 1,000 notes? I think that's the question. This is a very short essay, only a couple of pages. I want you guys to read it and then summarize it. So again, use all the procedures I've been telling you. Read it, annotate it, and then jot down sort of your list of notes. Take the stuff you've underlined and annotated, put it into a list of sequential notes. Include the thesis in there if possible, if you can identify one, or simply write one in your own words, what you think her argument is, along with all the other big ideas, the big uses of evidence. You have your numerical list. Then you can start arranging your summary using our 3-part structure. Introduce it, go through all of those big ideas, and then deliver the thesis in part 3. So just practice, get comfortable doing this, and soon we'll be able to start doing this with our own sources. So we are doing the formal summary by the end of this week. I don't think I need to explain much more about it. If you have questions, let me know. Read the assignment instructions. They are available. The assignment's already posted in the week 6 module. So take a look at exactly what I'm asking you to do. Again, stick with the procedures I've just outlined. Pick one of your sources and get to work. If you have any questions, let me know. And I'll see you guys next week when we get moving on paraphrasing and quoting.